No one could have imagined that a single afternoon inside the Harrington mansion would flip a man's entire world upside down when billionaire Charles Harrington walked through his own front door 2 hours earlier than usual. He thought he was coming home. Instead, he walked straight into a secret, one that had been hiding right beneath his nose for months. The sound came from the East Wing, faint, rhythmic, like someone moving furniture or shifting boxes. He followed it down the hall, his polished shoes echoing on marble, until he reached the gallery. That's when he saw her, a figure bent near the base of a sculpture worth over $100 million. A woman in a faded uniform, her gray hair tied beneath a scarf, her back slightly curved from years of work. Her name was Gloria Thomas, 56 years old, and for the past 3 months, she had been cleaning Charles's mansion like it was her own. But what he saw that day made him believe she wasn't cleaning at all. Charles Harrington was the kind of man who could buy silence with a signature. He'd built his fortune not from inheritance but from relentless control. Real estate, tech, finance, all of it running like clockwork under his watch. He wasn't cruel, but he was cold. Every person in his life had a place. His assistant, his chef, his driver, and his maids. All carefully chosen, all easily replaced. His mansion wasn't a home. It was a system, and inside that system, Gloria was invisible. She arrived before sunrise and left after dark. She spoke softly, worked quickly, and never asked for anything. At her age, most people would have slowed down, but she couldn't afford to. Her husband's medical bills were stacking, and her youngest son had just lost his job. Still, she carried herself with quiet dignity, the kind of strength that comes from years of being underestimated. But to Charles, she was just another face behind the uniform. That would change tonight. It started with a small red light, blinking on Charles's monitor. One of the motion sensors had triggered inside the gallery. He frowned. That room was off limits after hours. He tapped the feed, and there she was, Gloria, moving carefully around the centerpiece sculpture. He zoomed in. Her hand brushed the lower base of the art piece, deliberate, focused, like she was hiding something. Why would she be in there now? He muttered to himself. Minutes later, the footage showed her pulling a small wrapped cloth from her apron pocket. She bent down and placed it behind the pedestal. Charles's stomach dropped. He didn't see what was inside the cloth, only that she looked around before leaving. And in that single moment, suspicion replaced every ounce of respect he'd ever had for her. That night, Charles barely slept. His mind replayed the footage over and over. The whisper of cloth, the nervous glance over her shoulder, the careful hands. By morning, the narrative had already formed in his head. She's stealing. He told his head of security, "Leave the cameras running tonight. I want full coverage of the East Wing." Then he waited. Hours passed. Dinner ended. The mansion fell silent, and just before midnight, there she was again. Gloria entered the gallery with that same bundle of cloth. Charles held his breath. She kneeled beside the sculpture, opened the cloth, and inside wasn't jewelry or stolen silverware. It was something else. A small, old photo frame. Her trembling fingers brushed the glass, as if wiping away dust from a memory. Charles couldn't understand. What was she doing? Then she pulled a paintbrush from her pocket, dipped it into a jar, and began cleaning the delicate carvings of the sculpture. But to Charles, sitting in the dark room watching his screen, it didn't look like care. It looked like tampering, and in that single frame, his trust shattered. The next morning, the air in the mansion felt heavier. Gloria could feel eyes on her as she moved from room to room. The staff whispered. Something was off. When she passed by the study, Charles' voice cut through the air. "Miss Thomas," he said sharply, "could I have a word?" Her heart skipped. "Yes, sir?" He gestured toward the chair across from his desk. The silence between them was suffocating. He tapped the desk. "You've been with us 3 months, correct?" "Yes, sir. And you like your job?" "I'm grateful for it, sir." He leaned back, eyes cold. Then perhaps you can explain what you were doing in my gallery last night." Her breath caught. "Last night?" "Yes, near the Helston sculpture. At midnight." Her mouth went dry. "Sir, He raised a hand. "Before you say anything, understand that I have you on camera." The words hit her like a blow. For the first time in years, Gloria felt her knees weaken, but she didn't cry. She didn't panic. She just said quietly, "I wasn't stealing, sir." Charles's jaw tightened. "Then what were you doing?" Her answer, however, would come later, after a truth even he wasn't ready to face. Because what Charles didn't know was that the woman he now doubted was the same woman who once saved something far more valuable than his fortune, and his entire belief about trust, class, and humanity was about to collapse. The hours after that confrontation dragged like years. Charles tried to focus on the deals, the calls, the markets that waited for no man. But his mind kept replaying the image of Gloria in that dim gallery, her hand on the sculpture, the folded cloth, the quiet defiance in her eyes. He'd dealt with scandals before, boardroom betrayals, leaked emails, lawsuits, but nothing rattled him like the thought of being fooled by someone living under his own roof. By noon, the mansion felt colder. Staff whispered and avoided her path. Gloria moved slower, deliberate, as if every step were being measured by invisible eyes. And still she never broke. Not a tremor, not a tear. Charles told himself he would fire her by evening. But curiosity, an emotion he hadn't felt in years, made him wait. Because deep down, some part of him needed to know why. That afternoon, rain hammered against the glass walls of the office he'd built inside his mansion. Charles tried drowning himself in work until the sound of movement outside the door drew his attention. Gloria was dusting the shelves just beyond the study. For a moment he watched her reflection in the window. Steady hands, quiet rhythm. Then something caught his eye. A corner of a yellowed envelope peeked from her apron pocket. When she turned, it slipped to the floor. He waited until she left, then stepped out and picked it up. The handwriting was elegant but faded. On the front, to Mrs. Eleanor Harrington, with gratitude, 1992. Charles froze. Eleanor Harrington, his late mother. Inside, a letter written in neat cursive thanked Mrs. Harrington for funding an inner-city art program more than 30 years ago. It was signed, "With hope and love, Gloria Thomas." He stared at the name until the paper trembled in his hand. Could it be the same woman? The coincidence gnawed at him. He folded the letter carefully and slid it back where he found it. But now the question burned brighter. Who was Gloria Thomas, really? That night, thunder rolled through the hills. The mansion lights flickered, and the security monitors glowed pale blue in the dark. Charles poured himself a drink, trying to quiet the storm inside his chest. Then the phone on his desk buzzed, a number he didn't recognize. He answered. Silence. Then a woman's voice. "Mr. Harrington, this is Dr. Reeves from the City Art Foundation. I was told Gloria Thomas works for you now." He straightened. "She does? Why?" "She used to volunteer with us. We've been trying to reach her for weeks about a restoration project she left unfinished." "Restoration project?" "Yes," the woman said. "She's one of the few independent conservators certified in antique marble preservation. Brilliant eye for detail. If she's still interested, the museum is ready to compensate her." Charles set the glass down slowly. "Thank you, Doctor." When the call ended, he sat in silence, thunder echoing like a heartbeat. The woman he thought was a maid was a trained conservateur, someone who could restore priceless art, the very skill she'd shown in that midnight footage. And suddenly, everything he'd assumed began to crack. The next morning, he watched Gloria from the staircase. She moved through the gallery again, her touch gentle against the marble's surface. He noticed the precision now, the way she adjusted the humidity monitor before dusting, how she avoided harsh chemicals. She wasn't cleaning, she was protecting. He stepped closer, his shoes echoing on the floor. She turned, startled, but didn't speak. He said quietly, "You knew my mother." Her expression softened. Yes, sir. Long ago. He waited for anger or fear, but instead she smiled faintly. She gave me my first job. Said I had steady hands. Told me art needs people who listen before they touch. He felt the air leave his lungs. His mother, gone 15 years, had once said the exact same words to him. Gloria turned back to the sculpture. This piece was starting to dry at the base. I couldn't let it crack. It's one of the last originals your mother acquired before she passed. He stood there, silent, unsure what to feel, because for the first time, guilt felt heavier than wealth. By afternoon, word of the confrontation had leaked beyond the staff. A reporter from a lifestyle blog emailed his assistant. Is it true the Harrington household is under investigation for internal theft? Charles's blood ran cold. One misinterpreted clip from a security guard's gossip thread had spread online. He slammed the laptop shut. Every instinct told him to act fast. Control the story before it controlled him. He called Gloria into the study again. Ms. Thomas, he said, voice tight, I owe you an apology, but we have a problem. Someone's leaked footage of you in the gallery. It's out of context, but the press. She blinked, the first flicker of fear showing. Footage? Yes, I'll handle it. He didn't notice the tremor in her hands until she whispered, Please, sir, not again. He frowned. What do you mean? She swallowed hard. Years ago, at the museum, another misunderstanding cost me everything. They said I damaged a sculpture. I tried to prove I was cleaning it, but no one believed me. I lost my license, my reputation, everything. Your mother was the only one who defended me. Charles sank into his chair. The letter, the phone call, the memory, all of it connected, and the realization hit him. History was repeating itself, this time under his own roof. He spent the next day reviewing every frame of footage. The more he watched, the clearer it became. Her actions were precise, restorative, not destructive. But proof wouldn't erase the damage of rumor. The internet was already buzzing with headlines about a billionaire art theft scandal. Charles contacted the museum directly. Send me the original restoration report from the Helston sculpture, he ordered. When it arrived, the report confirmed it. Fine cracks at the base, discoloration at the joints. Gloria's nightly work had prevented further decay. She hadn't endangered the piece. She'd saved it. He exhaled, the sound trembling through the empty room. But now, another question haunted him. Could he repair what he had broken? The trust of a woman who'd already lost everything once before? 2 mornings later, a new article appeared online. It claimed Gloria was still under suspicion and that law enforcement was involved. None of it true, but it spread fast. When Charles confronted his PR team, they admitted the leak had come from within. One of the estate security guards had sold the story for cash. He fired the guard on the spot, but the damage was done. Gloria's phone buzzed non-stop with messages from old friends and distant relatives. Shame clung to her like smoke. That evening, she packed her few belongings in silence. Charles found her at the gate just after sunset. "You're leaving?" he asked. "I don't want to bring trouble to your door," she said softly. "I've lived through this once before. I can live through it again." He shook his head. "No, you won't." His voice cracked, a sound foreign even to him, because he'd made a decision that would shock the same media that mocked them both. The next morning, reporters gathered outside the mansion gates, cameras flashing like lightning. Charles stepped out first, immaculate suit, calm expression. Behind him, Gloria stood hesitant but proud, her uniform replaced by a simple gray coat. He raised a hand for silence. "You've all heard rumors," he said, his voice steady. "Let me tell you the truth." He paused, eyes finding Gloria's. "This woman saved a sculpture worth more than $100 million, and perhaps more than that. She saved me from my own arrogance." A murmur rippled through the crowd. He continued, "I accused her of theft. In reality, she was restoring a piece my late mother loved. Without her skill, it would have been lost." Cameras clicked furiously. Headlines would soon read, "Billionaire admits mistake, honors housekeeper." But that wasn't the end, because what he planned next would change Gloria's life forever. That evening, the mansion lights burned long after midnight. Charles sat in the gallery once more, the sculpture gleaming under soft light. Gloria entered quietly, unsure if she was still welcome. He looked up. "Miss Thomas, do you still have your conservator license?" She smiled sadly. "No, sir. It was revoked years ago." He nodded. "Then we'll fix that," she frowned. "Sir?" "I've arranged for your reinstatement," he said. "The museum already knows. They're expecting you next week to lead the Helston restoration publicly. Your name will be on the plaque." Her eyes widened, disbelief giving way to tears. "Why would you do that?" He took a slow breath. "Because my mother once told me that every masterpiece needs someone willing to see its cracks before its beauty. I failed at that." "You didn't." Silence filled the room except for the faint hum of the lights. He gestured toward the sculpture. "Finish what you started, Gloria." And as her hand steadied over the marble, the years of judgment began to fall away. A week later, the museum unveiled the completed sculpture. Journalists filled the hall, flashes painting the air white. Charles stood in the background as Gloria addressed the crowd, her voice trembling yet clear. "Art survives because people believe in second chances," she said. "Sometimes the cracks we hide are the proof we've lived." The audience applauded. For once, Charles didn't care about his company's stocks or his reputation. Watching her smile was enough. When the ceremony ended, she turned to him and whispered, "Your mother would have been proud." He nodded slowly. "So am I." The applause faded, yet the echo of that night followed Charles long after the museum lights dimmed. Something inside him had shifted, quietly, permanently. He drove home alone, the city gliding past in streaks of gold and gray. For the first time, the mansion didn't feel like a fortress. It felt empty. He stopped in front of the Helston sculpture, the same one that had sparked his suspicion. Now restored, it shimmered softly under glass. Every fracture smoothed, every vein of marble alive again, and in that reflection, he saw his own face. Older, humbled, almost human. Because what Gloria had repaired wasn't only stone, it was the fracture in his own heart. The next morning, a thin envelope rested on his desk, the same yellowed paper he'd once found hidden in her apron. This time, his name was written across the front. For Mr. Charles Harrington. Inside was a short note in Gloria's careful handwriting. "Your mother believed wealth is a tool, not a title. Thank you for remembering that. G.T." Beneath the note lay a small photograph. His mother standing beside a young Gloria in the old art studio, both smiling beneath streaks of sunlight and paint dust. He set the photo on his desk and realized he was smiling too. It felt like the story had come full circle, but fate had one last reveal waiting. Weeks later, while reviewing documents from the museum's archives, Charles stumbled upon an old audio tape labeled Harrington Fund, 1992. He pressed play. His mother's voice filled the room, soft and firm. "If anything ever happens to me, promise me you'll look after those who keep this house alive. The artists, the workers, the quiet ones. They are the reason beauty survives." Her voice cracked slightly, followed by the faint laughter of a young Gloria in the background. Charles sat back, eyes wet, realizing that somewhere in the chaos of ambition, he'd forgotten the simplest inheritance his mother had left. Compassion. He closed his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mother," he whispered. Months passed. The headlines moved on. Then, one morning, his assistant announced, "Sir, Miss Thomas is here." Gloria stepped into the office wearing a navy blouse, a museum badge clipped neatly to her pocket. She looked lighter now, years younger, maybe because the burden was gone. "I came to say goodbye," she said with a small smile. "They've offered me a permanent curator position." "Full-time," he grinned. "That's wonderful. But you don't need to say goodbye. You'll always have a place here." She shook her head gently. "I already do, sir. In your mother's house. And in yours." She extended her hand. He clasped it with both of his. holding a silence filled with mutual respect. And in that silence, the power dynamic that had once divided them simply ceased to exist. After she left, Charles gathered his senior staff in the gallery. He spoke plainly. No scripts, no corporate polish. "This house was built on my family's fortune," he said, "but it survives because of people like Gloria Thomas. From this day forward, every employee here will have full health care coverage and profit shares from our foundation's art fund." Shock rippled through the staff, but behind it came quiet applause, then louder until the marble walls echoed with something new: gratitude. Charles smiled faintly. "We're all restorers in our own way," he said. "Sometimes the cracks are where the light comes through." Later that night, alone in his study, he looked once more at the restored sculpture. The plaque beneath it had changed. It now read, "Helston Marble, restored by Gloria Thomas, 2025. He reached out, tracing the letters with his fingertips, and noticed something carved faintly just below, barely visible under the sheen of marble. His mother's initials intertwined with Gloria's. He hadn't seen it before. It had been there all along. He laughed softly. "You two planned this, didn't you?" In that moment, the mansion didn't feel cold anymore. It felt alive, with memory, redemption, and purpose. Gloria Thomas, once a housekeeper accused of theft, became a symbol of integrity at the museum. Her story spread quietly through local papers, inspiring others to believe that even after ruin, restoration is possible. Charles kept his promise. He funded scholarships for older artists and conservators who'd been overlooked because of class or circumstance. He called it the Thomas Initiative, and sometimes when reporters asked why, he simply said, "Because someone once taught me that masterpieces aren't perfect. They're just repaired with love." The camera pans back, the mansion glowing against the night, the sculpture shining at its center like a heart finally beating again. In a world quick to judge and slow to understand, maybe the greatest restoration isn't made of marble, but of mercy. If this story moved you, don't let it stop here. Watch our previous video for another powerful story of redemption and humanity. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps these stories reach the world.